Hi, everybody. Normally, this is the bit where I say welcome to Photographer's Coffee Morning, but actually now we're starting something completely new. The new podcast name about creative experience is kind of here to mark a change in the way that we're doing this podcast. Right at the beginning, this was about roundtables. It was a continuation of what we were doing on Clubhouse, which essentially was trying to help people feel a bit more connected with the community. That is still the mission, that's still the aim. What we found was that after lockdown, trying to get 8 creatives in the same space at the same time and on the same topic proved to be more and more difficult. The industry is challenging right now, and a lot of people are having to put more and more effort into making sure that their own creative practices are thriving. And I want to respect that. So we've changed format. We're trying to keep things personal. And as a result, you're going to see that rather than doing things remotely, as often as possible, we're going to be in person talking to real creatives about what makes their practice meaningful to them, sustainable as a career, and try and provide you with more insight as to how they've managed to manage their photography, videography, creative journey through the long run. So with all that said, where do we start? This is our first interview, and this week I'm going to be talking to a great friend of mine, Igor Demba. He was voted one of Rising Star's top 30 wedding photographers in the world. And on top of that, he's also got a thriving creative practice, educational practice, and he is a newly announced Canon Ambassador. Without much more intro, I'm going to get straight into the interview, and I hope you enjoy this relaxed conversation with Igor Demba. Don't forget to reach out to him on social and tell him if you enjoyed the episode. And yeah, guys, I hope you enjoy this, and I'll catch you in the next one.
I'm nervous.
It's been a while, hasn't it? Like, is this the first time you've done a podcast in person outside of Another Idea?
Yeah, it is. It is. I'm thinking about it. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I've done loads online, but never in person.
My first experience podcasting in person was at Another Idea, and obviously that's very much your space. It felt a little bit more like you're in control. I mean, how has it been, like, obviously starting out a podcast of your own? What's the transition been like, and how did you find that experience?
It's been amazing. It's such a massive learning curve. You very much realise and have a massive respect for anyone that does presenting, TV or just YouTube media in general, because it is hard work. It's a massive skill, and I think that it, at least for me, it doesn't come naturally. But at the same time, I love it because it engages my analytical brain. Really, I love, even within conversations, I'm a listener. Amongst friends, with Zoe, my wife, I'm always the listener. So my brain is always going in terms of how the conversation is going to go, where's it going to go. And sometimes as a presenter or host, you have specific points that you want to hit or lead the guest into. And most of the times the conversation veers into something completely different, which you have to allow space for that. But at the same time, how do you bring it back to wherever you want to lead to? So yeah, it's an incredible skill, and I'm super, super grateful for it, because it just allows you to become better presenter, better listener, and yeah, it's a great skill to have, definitely.
Because you get to the point where you start meeting people that you've always aspired to talk to as well, and especially in your case, you've had a bunch of people that I think a lot of people listening to this podcast would really enjoy hearing from. Like, you had a great interview with Rebecca Carpenter, Philip White, and this is not meant to be an exhaustive list by any stretch, but I actually really like the interview with Block Knives. That was awesome. Like, some really interesting people you've spoken to. Finn P, awesome photographer, really love his stuff, and again, I didn't even know about his work until I heard your podcast, and it's a nice discovery piece. But the thing you were saying about getting better at listening and trying to follow the thread of a conversation and trying to be, I don't know, maybe be a bit more present about the things you ask somebody so you get something interesting out of it. Like, Another Idea is really good at that, and I really do want to encourage people to kind of give that a shot. If you haven't already listened to Another Idea, you definitely need to go and do that.
100%.
You made the conscious decision not to focus just on photographers in that piece.
Yeah.
So considering that you're bringing experts in from outside of your kind of normal realm of operation, like, how did you find those interviews?
From the beginning, me and Sam Docker, we host Another Idea together. Shout out to Sam. If you don't know his work, it's beautiful. So yeah. And yeah, from the beginning, we very much wanted to seek inspiration, and I'm very much hot on this, seek inspiration from things outside of the wedding world. Whilst I love the wedding world, it's incredible, so much talent in it, but at the same time, it can be very much a bubble of itself. And we very much wanted to find inspiration from across the board and very much show photographers, creatives, that you can draw inspiration from anywhere, literally anywhere. And Block Knives episode was the perfect demonstrator of that, on how you can draw inspiration from a knife artisan, which is absolutely incredible, really. And yeah, it has become one of our favorite episodes. There's so many out there. Probably that and Grace Andrews are some of the top for me, anyway. But yeah, it's super crucial, because it's almost been like a bit of therapy. It has been a bit of therapy, really, because you very much see yourself within the guest, within certain aspects of it, but at the same time, the fact that you have to articulate clearly what you're thinking, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard. Again, it is a skill. So to do that has been absolutely great. Yeah.
Speaking of skills, like, could you give people a little bit of a history about the kind of work that you do? Obviously, before this, you'll have heard an intro that talks a little bit about who you are and your background, but it's always better hearing it from the artist rather than from me.
Where do you want to start?
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's not start with the whole, like, I was 7 years old and my granddad gave me a camera, because I think that if people want to hear your kind of like history, they can start somewhere else. But could you give people an overview of the kind of work that you do right now and where you're really focusing your time and attention when it comes to your photography?
Yeah, so destination weddings are my main thing. Absolutely love it, because you get to spend a day with people on the best day of their lives. It's absolutely incredible. And then add the element of destination travel, which I absolutely love. Some people, travel is not for everybody. It really isn't. But I get a kick out of taking myself out from my normal space and heading somewhere. Just the journey in itself, it's therapy in some ways for me, really, because it just invigorates me. It really gets me going. My creative juices flowing, really. It's quite motivating. It's just the journey in itself, and then arriving somewhere completely new that you haven't captured before. When it comes to light, textures, architecture, everything, really, it just draws, or it just creates so much inspiration for me. So you get the best out of me within that scenario. So yeah, that's the destination weddings. Then you get the education side of it, of the business, that I absolutely love. I love inputting into people's lives, businesses, creativity, how they can just level up whatever they're doing, really. So that's a big thing in terms of the business at the moment, and I very much want to grow that more and more. But in terms of capturing weddings, again, that's one of the things that I want to raise the bar as well, because sometimes you get people that they move into the education game, and that's it. They just become educators and not necessarily doers of that particular avenue that particular avenue that they educating. But no, for me, I want to be doing weddings for a very long time. I love it, and at the same time, I want to make a very long career out of it, really. So yeah.
Destination weddings, obviously, they must take a toll on you. Like, no matter how much you love travel, like, that's some business miles that you're putting in there.
Yeah, 100%. And over the years, it has become harder and harder, really. Unfortunately enough to have an incredible wife that allows the space to keep the business going, because and space to travel, really, because so we've got 2 daughters, and our firstborn, Ava, when she was born, we used to travel literally so much together, which was incredible, really. And I loved those years, because literally from the get-go, I think she was in a plane at 4 months, and we traveled so much together, and I really wanted to instill that, and I still want that today. But it becomes harder and harder when you got 2 kids and when they're younger, and yeah, it becomes harder. So you very much need someone that very much, a partner in this case, that very much gets what you're doing. But it has become harder and harder, and especially when your daughter starts realizing that, oh, Dad, are you going away now? Oh no. Yeah, it gets harder and harder, but at the same time, absolutely love it. And yeah, we want to be able to travel together more and more. So yeah, it's just finding dynamics of how we do it.
I mean, people talk a lot about work-life balance, but this is one of the ways you get it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm sure this is news to anybody, but the kind of weddings that you work are luxurious by modern standards, and very often people are booking you for multiple days at a time, which means that if you are going to be traveling for a week, it's less of a burden because you're there for a purpose, you're there to explore, you're doing a job, and then you come home. And I guess that must give you an option to kind of use the time that you have at home a little bit more freely.
Yes.
Because of that.
That is the beauty in some ways of the type of weddings that I tend to do, which most tend to be luxury weddings. The fact that you are able to capitalize more in terms of how much you earn, really, because and sky's the limit, really. You get photographers that per wedding they might earn, I don't know, 20k, 50k. Literally, the sky is the limit. But at the same time, with destination weddings, it just allows you to be able to earn a lot more than a one-day wedding. And by saying destination weddings, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be abroad, because it can literally be anywhere within the UK, which has become more of a norm, or happening more often lately, which has been great, really, because it just means that you're traveling less, really, and still earning more, really. So yeah.
I think it's interesting you say that, because obviously, like, mutual friends to us, like Ollie and Steph Photography, they're based on Skye in Scotland, and they're exactly that. So they live on Skye, but that's such a hotbed for people eloping. Beautiful, like incredible space.
I would love to have that. Grey Peterborough is not much of a hot spot for weddings, but yeah, Skye is. I still haven't been, but it is one of my bucket list locations, really, to capture.
Which is weird, because some of the backstory for us, like we've worked together before, like both like producing educational content and like shooting weddings, etc. We've done that together before. And the last time that we did like a big road trip like that, it was to the Highlands, and we were right on the coastline, like looking over at Skye, like wishing to get there, and just like
so close,
so far.
Yeah, so far. We were knackered. That was an adventure in itself, really. So yeah, but yeah, we were able to grab quite a lot of content with that. And visited Glencoe, which was beautiful. And what really surprised me about that trip was the fact that at Glencoe we only spent probably, I don't know, an hour, if that, because the light was going as well, and it was a long journey, a lot of driving, but going to the point, what surprised me about that was that we were able to grab content so quickly. It didn't need to be a full afternoon sort of thing. It was super quick, and I was so happy with what we grabbed, because it was incredible. So thank you.
No, you're welcome. It was my pleasure. And I think one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, I get the sense that really the educational side of what you're doing is more about trying to help other people to do what you're talking about, to see more places, to have a broader experience, and maybe to kind of think of themselves as a photographer outside of the ballroom weddings they're doing right now, or village hall weddings in the UK, or like wherever you might be. If you shoot in the same places again and again and again, later in your career, that can lead to you feeling really stale and maybe resentful of the work that you're doing. And getting some kind of perspective on that can be hugely valuable. Do you think that's the reason why you've moved into education? Because it's pretty clear from what you're saying that actually you're not doing it just to be an educator. It feels more like you're trying to share something, and you need it to be practical, so you're staying rooted in the practice.
Yes and no. There is sort of like a brand element of it. I've got my goals in some ways, but at the same time, I love educating, and I never realized how much I love it until I started doing it and got opportunities to do it. And it always surprises me. And I'm sure that the audience will relate, but it always surprises me that it might be imposter syndrome or whatever it might be, but I always think that I'm not sure what to say or what to give. And whenever I do it, or whenever I start, or coming out of it, I very much realized that actually, yeah, I've got a lot to give. I've got something that I do know quite a few things that I will be able to share. And I find it that whenever I meet photographers or creatives in general, we all have something to give. We all have. And no matter whatever level you might be at, we all have something to give. You're always ahead of someone that you'd be able to give one specific piece of knowledge or more, really. So if whoever's listening, watching, if you're umming and ahhing about it, just go for it, because there will always be someone on the other side that is in search of more knowledge, and that just raises the bar for the industry, raises the bar for yourself as a communicator and just person in general, really.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because actually I'd say this is an argument between an intuitive practice and somebody that's more like technical in their approach. So there's this kind of idea and fight between intuition and technique or practice. Like the purpose behind your work very often, like the photography and the education, it feels like you're trying to express something that you can't put into words. Mm-hmm. It's like an ineffable thing. You aren't particularly focused on the vocabulary that you're using or the words that are said. It's like, do you get the feeling that I want? And you can see that across the board. So when you're saying, I don't know if I've got anything to give when you're educating, that kind of tracks, because you probably don't, you're not aware of it. You're a very intuitive creative, like from an external perspective.
Yeah, you're hitting the nail on the head there. And I'm very much about a vibe. With everything really, in terms of inspiration, I very much analyze the vibe first, the aesthetic, and then, wrongly or rightly, and then add the subjectivity to it, really, the meat, really. But it has to have a vibe, whatever it may be. It has to have some sort of visual or audio language, whatever it might be. Yeah, it has to have a vibe, really, because otherwise, it can be very boring, really. So yeah.
One of the things I wanted to talk about was the way that you've kind of approached your photography practice, and we'll come back to the education a bit, because I think they're really heavily linked. And for me, like one of the things that I love doing when I'm doing any kind of education is like brand analysis and understanding where people fit. Mm-hmm. And I think that intuition is like a really core component of your work. You're very good at basically picking up a piece of equipment, exploring what it's capable of, and then when you develop an affinity for it, like never letting go. Mm-hmm. But in a good way, because it means that you can focus on the things that you care about, the things that you talked about when I asked you about your practice. The reason I did that is I wanted to know from you, like, what do you care about? And I'm a technical person. I'm like understanding. But this is where we work well together, because I think you need both. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I wanted to understand a little bit more about was where a lot of your kind of early inspiration for work came from. You started doing weddings, you were technically competent, you had your practice running, but what was it that was fueling you creatively at that point?
I started wedding photography very much because I realized that seeing artists, especially in the US and here in the UK as well, seeing artist photographers, looking at their work, again, it had a visual identity to it. It had something about them that was very specific, a voice, quite unique. And I love that. I absolutely love that. It's so easy, especially within the wedding world, it's so easy to see so much sameness, so much sea of mediocrity. But it's super, super crucial to have individuality within it, really. And that's what drew me to that. To this world, really, and seeing those artists and photographers, it was absolutely incredible. People like Ed Pierce, who very much like him, his work is very quiet, very still, and very, I don't want to say mute, but it was just very quiet, very in the moment, beautiful. And then you can get people like Fehoristi, who is very loud and very in your face, and with like 2, 3, 4 images is able to tell you a beautiful narrative with so much little work in some ways. It's absolutely incredible to study those guys. That was a super crucial thing for me. People again like Nirav Patel, who's absolutely incredible at capturing light and reading it and seeing things in a beautiful way that you might not actually see yourself. then you get, there's so many. We could literally be here all day, and I'll go through them. But at the same time, yeah, Sean Flanagan, for example, has this beautiful ability of being dropped anywhere and just really being able to absorb everything that's around you and capture it in a very street photography way, almost like in your face, but at the same time with a very clear visual identity, in the sense of using 24mm, but drawing in really close, making you feel as a visualizer that you're quite intimate within the moment, but at the same time very loose, very fluid, frames and composition that you wouldn't expect, and almost like a little bit of a carelessness to it, which is quite beautiful. And within all of those guys, I've picked up things here and there really that I really love. But at the same time, there's always evolution to be had. So at the moment, I'm very much wanting to focus on portraiture and fashion. That's something that I really want to grow in, and I don't think that my eye gravitates to it quite naturally. Yes, there is elements of that within my work, but it could be a lot stronger. So that's something that I, for myself, really want to grow a lot in more. So yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned visual identity, because that's literally the name of my course. Like, and I'm saying this as somebody you mentioned before about being a practicing photographer. Like, for me, I don't necessarily agree with that. Like, I think that one of the lovely things about educating is that if you understand how you can help somebody, that is an asset in itself and a completely different skill set. But the visual identity course is, because of what you just said, like, it's not a sea of mediocrity, it's a sea of people competing for the same client.
Yeah.
And that's the issue. So when you look at people that may have a similar aesthetic, when a client's looking at those two people, it becomes a numbers game or a personality game. Like, do I like him or her better? Do I like this price or that price better? And you're forcing somebody to make a value decision based on other qualities other than the work. Whereas when you do what you're talking about here and you differentiate yourself, you make your work stand out in some way or more authentic, or try and experiment, stop looking at your competition, you start moving in directions where there is less direct comparison. And I think that people now are more visually educated than they ever have been. Like, when we were first starting in photography, Instagram wasn't a thing, and people couldn't just see all the greatest wedding photographers in the world instantly. But now, if I wanted to see somebody doing incredible fashion-based work, I can find Emily Kelly's work, or I can find, I don't know, like Paul Von Rita's work, or I can find Jose Villa's, and it's instant, and I can see exactly what they're doing. I can analyze how they're doing it. The issue then becomes, if I want to be interested in fashion, how do I then not lose Igor?
Yeah.
Because I think that's the temptation. Like, we all want to develop in areas that we find interesting or see a benefit in, or frankly think our customers care about, because that's the point. Like, in the end, this is a business and an art. So you have to find that kind of overlap. Like, where do those two things come together?
I think it has to do very much with experimentation, and I find that it's one of those things that perhaps as artists we don't do as much often as we should, and putting yourself in positions where you're creating personal work, where you are able to really just experiment, try different things, and at the same time I find that, yes, we touched upon fashion, but I find that at the moment I'm drawing a lot of inspiration through YouTube. YouTube is probably number one at the moment for me, in terms of filmmakers and YouTubers that are just literally traveling the world or whatever they're doing. And again, just people that have a very specific aesthetic and vibe about them that just draws me into them, that I really want to, I would love to do that more. I would love to learn that and bring it into the wedding world, really. So yeah, experimentation is crucial, really. So that's the journey I'm on at the moment, really.
And I think obviously for a lot of people, the reason they're tuning in right now is to hear you talk about this kind of stuff, because they love the way your work looks. For anybody that isn't familiar with your work, I just wanted to give a bit of an overview of kind of the feeling that comes through with it and some of the kind of inspirational elements, and maybe talk on a bit of how you got to those decisions. So it's definitely not pure documentary, but there's definitely a documentary element to what you do. Most of your work is very intimate in the sense that you can feel that you're present in the moment, and you've already touched on this earlier, wide lenses, like expansive vistas, but rather than standing back, you're close, and you're trying to kind of give the viewer a sense of involvement that you wouldn't normally get. From a color palette point of view, you lean on very rich tones like golds and greens and like rich blacks and all this kind of stuff. Things that give you a sense of luxury without leaning too heavily on a lot of the tropes that come with that, like light and airy looks from a lot of the film photographers, or dark and moody more like Nirav Patel, because like, again, his work is beautiful and carries a lot of the emotion that yours does, but your presentation is more like high looks and not like contemplative luxury. It's very, very, very rich.
Don't get me wrong though, it's it's one of those battles that I probably have daily in terms of like seeing my work and knowing that I could be looking like this and it could be looking like that. So it's a constant battle really to be happy with your own work, if that makes sense, because I'm a worst critic. I really am. I have the ability of at the same time being very much like, yeah, it's done. I like that, and I think that's one of the things that I'm good at in terms of analyzing aesthetics and taste, just simply taste. I find that it's probably my superpower, if you want to call it that. Really, it's probably harder. Yeah, it's all good to have taste, but it's harder to implement that taste and make something tangible out of it. You can be an incredible curator, but to actually create something and have that sense of heightened aesthetic, it's hard. It is hard. It's super, super hard. So yeah, it's a constant practice.
And it rings hollow when it's not right as well. And I think that's the difference. Because for me, like, I'm really good at pattern recognition, but I'm definitely the kind of technical person. So if you ask me, like, how did you achieve this? 95% of the time I'll be able to tell you exactly how it was achieved, because that's how my mind works. Like, I don't really understand it until I understand how it was made, and then all of a sudden my appreciation deepens. And I think this comes back to that thread of intuition again for you, because rather than it being a sense of style, it's a strong sense of intuition. So you know what you like aesthetically, but it isn't something that you put into words because you don't need to. Like, why would you? You have this filter that allows you to decide, does this meet my standard? Yes, no. And there's a huge list of complex criteria that you don't verbalize that just, it clicks.
It becomes very much instinct, really. But that's because, again, I'm constantly immersing myself in good art. And that's probably the main reason for the way my work looks, having a strong sense of aesthetic, really. I'm constantly immersing myself in good art, whether it's for YouTube, whether it's for magazines, whether it's for photography, but whatever it might be, really. Constantly deconstructing things, and why does that look like that? Why am I gravitating towards this? Is it the tones? Is it the light? Is it the vibe? Is it the music underneath? Is it the sound effects? The way things have been cut? Is it the pacing? All of that I'm constantly analyzing and constantly trying to figure out how can I bring that into my own work. And it's super crucial. I find that sometimes we watch things just for the sake of watching it, and don't get me wrong, I love to just watch mind-numbing TV just to wind down and whatever else, but at the same time it's super crucial to constantly be immersing yourself in good art that draws inspiration to you, so that things become an instinct to you. It just becomes second nature to you when something visually good appears to you.
You are what you eat, basically. You need to put it in. And I think this is something that we share. Like, we both love print. Like, I actually, one of my regrets when I was on your podcast is you asked me what's inspiring you right now, and I talked about a TV show, which frankly still inspires me. It was Loki. I still think it's one of the best looking TV shows like ever. But print is huge, and I think that understanding what makes a good photograph is about more than just the technical element, and having somebody's non-photography eye on something, helping to curate something like this subject is interesting, and then have a photograph that's done in an interesting way. It is so valuable. Also from film, Shot Deck is one of the best resources that you could come across.
If you haven't heard of Shot Deck, it's one of those things that you need to check out. It's this massive database where stills from movies and video as well, but mainly stills have been taken from movies where you are able to analyze color palettes, specific shots, in terms of composition. You can spend the whole day there.
Yeah.
It's absolutely beautiful. But that said, what are the sort of things that movies, TV shows, YouTube, whatever, that are inspiring you at the moment?
Me? Oh, like this is a hard question. Like I think that basically anything that gets put on Apple TV Plus looks incredible.
Yeah.
Like it may not be the most interesting show, but it's definitely going to look the part.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love the way that Silo looked recently. That was an incredible show. Foundation was a little bit too clean, but going in the right direction.
What do you mean clean?
Silo has like a texture to it because for anybody that doesn't know, Silo is a sci-fi show that's set in kind of a more oppressive environment. There's no real natural light anywhere. Everything's fluorescent elements. It's warm. There's grain everywhere. Whereas
living in a basement.
Yeah. Whereas in Foundation, they clearly use the camera with a larger sensor. Like it looks like either an Alexa 65 or something similar, and shot it in a very pristine way. So every frame is clean. And there's nothing particularly organic about it. There's no crazy color shifts. The actual color palette is very reality and not shifted in any way.
Okay, I get you.
It's quite literal.
Yeah.
And that fits the subject matter because it's fantastic subject matter.
Yeah.
It's just kind of that balance. I can see why they did it. I just don't love the aesthetic of it.
Perfect example of that is Ozark, isn't it? Where
blue. Yeah, everything's shot at 4200 Kelvin. Like everything's blue.
Yeah. Ozark, Breaking Bad. Yeah, they're very specific with their color palettes. So yeah, that's cool.
So that's me. Like magazine wise, there's I can't remember if it's Japanese or Korean, called Casa Brutus. It's not in English, but the graphic design in it is absolutely top tier. The photography they choose is not technically what I love, but the subject matter that they pick, impeccable every single time. If you can get a copy of Casa Brutus, I would recommend it strongly. It's amazing.
Casa Brutus
and Magazine B for brand breakdowns, but they're a perennial favourite of mine. I think they are Korean, but they sell those translated into English. Design's not as good, photography's not as good, but they understand brand in a way that's really interesting. And the Do books, I love Do lectures, and the Do books are great. If you have an interest in anything, you can probably find something that hinges on it. Do Photo especially is Andrew Painter wrote it, and he's a photographer that I absolutely love. He did campaigns for brands like Levi and a bunch of other companies, but rather than focusing on the garments, it's all built around creative lifestyles. Mm-hmm. So his actual photography is something that I would consume endlessly for fun, and he wrote a guidebook on how to do it. So that's an amazing resource if people haven't tried that. I love his stuff. So that's for me. What about you?
Ooh, it's such a hard question, really is. And even as you were talking,
so you're waiting for the return.
I was very much thinking, what is it for me? A lot of YouTube, a lot of travel movies. That's what's consuming my feed at the moment. At the same time, a lot of education-based content. That's something that I'm constantly being inspired by, and specifically people that are doing things differently, which is quite nice. It's so hard. This is so hard.
This is the thing. And when you're the guest, you're like, you're not ready. And it's always like, I'm under pressure. I need to say something high-minded.
Yeah. But
and I know I stole a few of yours too. I'm aware.
I've spoken about them before in the pod, but Colin and Samir are absolutely incredible. They very much create content very much about the creative economy and how content creators are going in the world and how they making their money. And these are absolutely incredible artists that are creating beautiful things. But the way they break things down is, I love that. And they've been doing it for years and years and years. So seeing their dynamic as well as a duo, I absolutely love that. And I'm constantly learning through that, really. I'm watching a lot of content creators at the moment, simply because for my own content, really, again, I love to break things down, and I probably spend way too much time breaking things down rather than actually creating. So that's always a constant battle for me. But I guess the latest that I absolutely love, and I'm a massive sci-fi buff, but the latest one that I absolutely loved was June. In terms of composition, it's just absolutely incredible. So beautiful.
It's Greg Fraser. Like the Batman's exactly the same. Like
Mm-hmm.
that film, that kind of hits my like far edge of like what kind of texture I like in a film. It's right on the edge of being essentially pure darkness.
Yeah.
Tons of grain. Lenses are super soft. Like really interesting character of the film. I love Greg Fraser's work. I think it's great.
Something that I'm finding at the moment, and it's been a massive journey at the same time, whilst drawing inspiration from all things creative is super crucial. I find that I've been putting inspiration to the side a little bit more, and just focusing on discipline. Just focusing on discipline and just trying to create healthier habits, really, because I find that inspiration is amazing and everything else, but if you want to get things done, if you have dreams and goals and you want to see those things into fruition, you can have all the inspiration and motivation that you want in life, but if you don't have the discipline to actually press play, record, do, things are just simply not going to happen. So cultivating a greater sense of discipline has been massive for me over the past few months, and it's hard work. It is hard work because whilst I can be disciplined, I very much, and perhaps I'm being hard on myself, but whilst I can be disciplined on certain things, I can be very scattered in terms of like focusing and just gunning for one specific objective. So it's been super crucial to just very much learn more about myself and just techniques and instilling the discipline to do more. Yeah.
I'm with you on that. Like, to the point where I have a coach that works with me basically every day. Joel, thank you so much. I couldn't live without you. You're incredible. And her role essentially is to make me do things, because I think one thing that you find is that it's easier for us and more comfortable to look at the things that we're good at. And I think both of us are quite intuitive in the sense that we know what we like. We're really good at finding the things that we like, and whether your goal is then execution and going out and producing the work, or understanding the technique of how to produce it, and then whichever way you look at it, actually doing the thing is the thing that causes growth. Like look at education principles. It's called the learning cycle. You need action to then work out what went right, like reflect on it and theorize of how you can do it different, and then take action again. It's about more than just kind of theorizing all the time, reflecting all the time. Without the action, you don't do anything. And I think sometimes having accountability and having somebody that will keep you on track is really helpful for that. And for me, it's vital. I'm not the average person because I am neurodivergent. I'm dyspraxic, so I've got poor executive function. So forcing myself to do that, forcing myself to take action when it isn't intuitive, is very difficult. But for many people, even if you're not neurodivergent, it's just good practice. Like have somebody to keep you on track. I mean, how many times have we talked and like just you've asked me a question because you're stuck on it and it leads you to action. You need somebody to be there that you can trust to be a sounding board.
Yeah, which is super crucial to have those people around you or resources really that will cause you to move things forward. But I find that as well, at least for me, I've been on a journey of removing distractions. That's been massive for me at the moment. And looking at it now, I'm like, how did I used to get work done doing things out as I used to? But I used to be very much a person that would have probably, and I still do in some ways, 500 tabs open in my browser, and at the same time, TV series or movie on the side, whilst I'm editing or doing an email, and just blocks and blocks. And I've got a massive screen as well, blocks and blocks of things within my screen. Whereas now, at the moment, again, it's all a journey, but I've got this browser plugin that literally between 8 till 6, I can't go onto these sites. It literally won't let me, and it's there. And my productivity has skyrocketed just simply because of that, really. And then using things like Pomodoro technique, where you work in increments of 25, 30, 45 minutes and just doing deep work. I find that I get a joy and kick out of getting into that flow state where you've been working for an hour or two, and you're like, oh, that amount of time has gone, and I've been in this really. So yeah, it's been a massive journey, and I find that as creatives, because we are drawn towards the creative side so heavily, I need to find inspiration. We say it to ourselves, I need to find inspiration. How can I move forward without inspiration or motivation? But I find that discipline trumps all of that. It literally trumps all of that. So I find that it's super crucial at the moment to just hone in on that and just explore growth. I've been, again, disciplined with the gym and just hitting it up a lot more regularly. And Tom, I started running. I started running, and as I saved my run last week, I realized that I hadn't ran for over 2 years, and I was like, oh man, this needs to change.
I blame the pandemic. Like, honestly, it killed so many people's like good practices. And I think the thing you're talking about discipline, everyone had a huge pattern interrupt. So whether you've been doing this for like 20 years, 30 years, you're having to build up that muscle memory again of like, how do I work at pace? How do I work quickly? And for people in the wedding industry, I think a lot of them have just been through an absolute marathon. Like the editing pile that a lot of people are staring at right now is huge. And I think that this is where the flow is important. Like, because to do quality work, you need to give yourself good chunks of time to do that. And for me personally, like very often my days are scheduled in such a way that I can work really hard for a long period of time whenever my brain allows me to do that. Because there'll be points of the day when I'm infinitely distractible and I cannot prevent that. So it's giving myself the room to still have sprint time in there. So if I need to do 4 hours of video editing on that day, it means that I can spend an hour like doing absolutely nothing and still have the 4 hours to sprint and get that done. And being hyper focused, I tend to be, I'm sure you're the same, way more productive when you have huge blocks of time and you get into the flow of it, especially with video editing over photo, because so much of it's about understanding narrative and how does this statement relate to the statement made an hour ago, and building those things together requires like a lot of attention. So the thing you're mentioning about not having multiple tabs open, and just the idea of that is terrifying to me. Like I started using an app called Arc Browser recently, which is built around...
You recommended that to me a few weeks ago.
It's fantastic because essentially it means that you've got different workspaces set out with folders. The things are organized, they're open, but they're invisible. So all you see is the web page you're currently looking at. And if you need to go somewhere else, you have to make a conscious effort to bring that tabs up and go see it. You can't flip back and forth. And on the phone, there's a phone app. It only has one tab, which means I can't search for 10 things at once. I can search for one thing at once. And again, these are little things that you can do to trick yourself into being a bit more productive, because you have to be conscious about when you're consuming.
And whenever I listen to podcasts and everything else, sometimes you might think that I'll never get to that sort of level. We're all on a journey, and the point is to just be a constant growth. That's the main thing, really. Be a constant growth, because I'm finding that rather than rushing for the sort of like dopamine hits that you get from having a TV series on the side, the pleasure that I get from having a finished piece of work, or just have spent 2-3 hours doing deep focused work, it's so much greater than that silly dopamine hit that you would have gotten from watching Ozark on the side, really. So yeah, it's something, it's so simple, isn't it? It's nothing groundbreaking that we're talking about here, but I find it that for me it's been massive over the past few months of just seeking that discipline to really create work, do work, rather than just drawing on inspiration and creating a massive library of things that and dreams that you might be able to get to one day. So yeah.
And I think that kind of active library is a big thing to build, like how you can look back and see the things you produced when you did delay gratification. It's almost like they say confidence is a useful byproduct of achievement, and this is similar. Like creativity is a reward later when you can look back and see the things that you've made. That one action alone might not be might not be super inspiring right now, but when you look back in a year's time and realize that you've completed like 37, 40 weddings, or you've done 4 commercial projects that were like at this level and had this much deliverable, and the client's happy, like those are things you can look back and they have a tangible effect on you as an artist. Whereas the inspiration, that's the sexy bit, it's the bit we all like. And speaking of, we're going to talk about another thing that kind of can feed us that way in a second, but I think that you're right, that the work has to be there. Speaking of things that we can focus on too much, let's talk a little bit about gear for a little while. Because for me, like, I always feel there's this push-pull. Like, you're clearly from the way you speak, you're a very intuitive artist. Where by contrast, we had Tom Barnes on in one of the last episodes, and he is very much technically minded. He's a creative, but he loves the kit. And I think I probably fall more in line to that than to where the way you operate.
Yeah.
But equipment is important. It has to be.
Oh, yeah.
And I think one of the reasons that we get on so well and complement each other is that very often if you're trying to achieve something, you can ask for that kind of input and I can give you a meaningful answer about how to achieve something that you're looking for. But because you have that restraint and you have that sense of, do I need this? You come from it from a very different perspective. So could you talk to me a little bit about how you select equipment, what you've been using up to this point, and then we'll talk a little bit about what's next. This is not just a prop on the table, I promise.
Yeah, I am very much intuitive in terms of the way I work, but at the same time, my gear is 100% an extension of me, and I've learned that gear over the years. And whilst that I might say I'm not much of a gearhead, but I do know my gear. I know that thing inside and out, and yeah, it's super crucial because it's very much an extension of myself, really. And recently just got a new camera, and I've been literally practicing so much in terms of the buttons and everything else has changed a little bit, but still very much similar to what it is, but working it backwards and not looking at the buttons and see if I can still if I can still reach and figure things out and change settings without looking. And yeah, that's super crucial. So that's one of the things I've been practicing. So I find that especially as photographers, we need to know this thing inside and out, really, because if you want to be fast, I don't want to be, especially with weddings, such high fast paced environments. You need to be able to be reactive and really quickly. To be able to know my gear inside and out is a super crucial thing. And at the same time, selecting lenses, I have changed a lot over the years in terms of how I've worked in terms of with lenses, but I guess in some ways technology has changed as well. So that's probably one of the main reasons why I have changed. But I used to be a very much a ride or die. It has to be prime lenses, and that's the way. But recently I started using zoom lenses, which have been absolutely incredible, and it almost felt like cheating because I was able to go back and forth so much easily. And I guess, yeah, the whole prime thing, I guess it came from the fact that I was able to use quite low apertures and the depth of field, which is a massive thing for my work and the visual look, the way I like things. It has been super crucial, but at the same time, again, with experimentation, I found that zoom lenses are very much in at the moment for me, really, and it's something that I want to try more, really. Yeah, I don't know if I answered the question really, but
oh no, you did. Like, I want to take it back to previous stages. So this is like an overview, but let's say I was talking to Igor from 6 months ago. What camera were you using? What lenses were you using?
I used to shoot on the 5D Mark IVs. And for some, that's like, what? Still DSLR? But I love that. I love that camera still today. I know it front to back. You can literally put it in my hand. I'll be able to change things without looking at it. yeah, it's just a beautiful thing. And in a mirrorless world, I find that very much like the 5D Mark One and Mark Two, they have this sort of like almost like film-like quality to them. It feels like that. A bit. It feels a bit analog. um, Maybe because they're that old, but and things are moving so fast today in terms of like just technology in general.
I think it's even more than that. Like, part of the reason why I always felt like DSLRs made sense for your work, because we've had this conversation before, like, is it time to move to mirrorless? We've tested. You weren't staying on it out of ignorance. It
Yeah.
was, you were making that choice because it was still the best solution.
Yeah.
And I think a huge part of what made your work is that you weren't always tack sharp. You were occasionally having soft focus, but the way a DSLR will do that is very different to mirrorless. Like, you've probably found this already, because on the table we have a Canon R3. This is the camera that you're currently using. And the way the focus system works here is that something will always be in sharp focus. It may not be the object that you want, but something will be in sharp focus. Whereas in a DSLR, if it misses focus, it's like, okay, it's a millimeter or two in front of the eye, or it's a millimeter or two behind the eye. And if you know this, when you're using your DSLR, you can be shooting with the lenses, you can see the depth of field in the viewfinder. And if you think it's misfocused a little bit, you just scooch your body back slightly and it puts it back in the focal plane. And there are all these things that you can do to manipulate focus in a way that doesn't rely on subject tracking, eye autofocus. Whereas if your aim was to produce something that was always sharp, always crisp, always kind of full contrast, always beautiful in that sense, DSLRs were not the perfect solution. The second mirrorless came out, you should have made the move. But that isn't what your art's about.
I think as well, because my work has evolved over the years, and the way I'm evolving as a photographer, I'm moving more into video. It's super crucial. I find that today, if you are a photographer and you're not tapping into that space, you're doing yourself a misservice, really, because it's the way things are moving forward. So that was a massive thing as well for me in terms of like moving to mirrorless, because and specifically the R3. What I love about it is that it's such a great hybrid camera, perfect for image making, but at the same time, if you want to create incredible quality videos, it's there. It has it really. So yeah, it just made sense really for me. And at the same time, the R3, it just, the way it feels good in my hands, it's incredible. And I think for me, that's a super crucial thing. And one of the things that I've always loved about the Mark IVs, the way that camera feels in my hand, it just feels right. And again, going into that intuitive thing, it's super crucial to have gear that I'm comfortable with, and I don't have to think about. I don't necessarily have to look into the viewfinder. I do it intuitively, and that comes with time, obviously. But in terms of the R3, it just makes sense. You hold that camera, and it feels right in my hands, really. Whereas holding the R6 and the R5, I'm like,
It's not quite the same.
It's not quite the same.
I mean, for anybody, like a bit of inside baseball, if you're watching the video for this, the video's being recorded on 3 R6 Mark IIs. And actually,
and they're beasts of a camera. They're incredible.
Beautiful. Like, and I've never been happier with the combination of stills and video. It isn't the best video quality I've ever had out of a camera. I still think the Fuji X-H2S is beautiful for that. But the difference is that these are consistent. Like the focus has been accurate on our eye. I know that it's not going to jump to the background. It's a consistency thing. And like you said about video, this is something that's a reality. If we're only photographers, we can make very different choices. Like, you might choose to shoot medium format, or you might choose to shoot, I don't know, like some kind of sports cameras. That you've got other choices. You could even shoot film. But the fact is that I do think there's going to be a point coming soon where that hybrid space is going to be where everybody has to be. And if you're not paying attention to that, you're going to get left behind. To kind of switch gears a little bit to the prime versus zoom thing you just mentioned, I actually think it's interesting because I didn't know that you were contemplating making the zoom switch. Like, we've talked about you having one, but it's nice hearing your thought process on it. It's interesting that you mentioned that your mindset's changed from purely inspiration to active experimentation, like doing something. And I think that is a difference, because part of the reasons why I love primes is because they've got an opinion. And the reason why I use them is because I know when I put it to my eye, I'm going to be constrained, which makes me think differently. I think you've gone through that phase and you're fully aware of what you're trying to produce always. And you've realized that actually the box is not the important thing. Like putting your eye to the camera and seeing exactly what you wanted to see instantly isn't the thing. You're going to work until you find the thing that you want. And at that point, the zoom becomes a more practical tool, because actually it's giving you more chances to do that, to be active, be proactive.
And I'm quite fast paced in terms of how I capture my work, especially when it comes to portraits. It's very much bam, 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 bam. Got my methods in terms of like start wide, move in, and shoot the same thing in different ways, different angles. And then when it comes to the edits and telling a story, that's when the magic happens really. But I find that with the zoom, it just makes your work easier in some ways, and I'm a better artist because of it really. So I want the versatility as well, especially when you're moving into the video space. I want to be able to just change rather quickly really. So I've been toying with the idea of just having 2 zoom lenses and do away with my primes, but at the same time there's this quality that you get with primes that really beautiful really, but at the same time I'm in that experimentation phase, let's say.
Absolutely. And actually your lens selection's always been a little bit interesting for a wedding photographer. Like very commonly you'll find that a lot of the fine art photographers, for example, will favor like a 50mm or like, again, I love a 50 as well, it's my favorite. But can you talk a bit about the focal lengths that you're choosing and like why you've historically gone for that? Obviously we know you're moving in a new direction now, so you're not losing any secrets, but what do you usually shoot with?
From 24 to 35 to 45 tilt shift to 50, which I never used to be fair, then 85 and recently 135. With the 24, I love that lens because I'm able to capture landscapes in a beautiful way. For portraits and documentary as well, it works beautifully, especially with the whole idea of capturing things close to you really, and moving in and not being afraid of getting the shot, and being close to a subject or whatever you're capturing really. So that lens is beautiful for that really. And then for just talking head stuff, it's perfect as well. 35, probably 70% of my work is created on that lens, and I love it. I'll probably never give away that lens really, because just the way my brain works when I'm shooting with that lens is it just feels natural, and it's the closest to the human eye in terms of the way we see. It's a beautiful thing. You can do the documentary, you can do the landscapes, you can do the portraits, you can do details with it. So yeah, it's always a win-win. Then the 85 it usually comes out at ceremonies when I want to be a bit more discreet, and the 135 is exactly the same. But at the same time with the 85, it's incredible to shoot portraits with it. When I shoot portraits, it might be a bit silly, but usually I tend to go literally through most of my lenses. Again, with the whole idea of shooting the same thing in different ways. I usually tend to start with 24, grab one to get, then the 35, then the 45 tilt shift, and then the 85. Again, I find that it's important to have those sort of rules that you have within your work, but at the same time, don't be sort of like constrained by them, but have those rules so you create a specific look that is innate to you really. The 45 tilt shift usually comes out when I feel like I've gotten what I needed with the 35 in terms of portraits. Usually it comes out for that, portraits and landscapes. It's an incredible lens. If you haven't tried a 45 or tilt shift lens in general, you should, because it just creates this beautiful toy-like landscape. The way sometimes people describe it, and I didn't realize until someone said it, oh, it just looks like a little toy town. I know it's real, but it looks like a toy town sort of thing. So I absolutely love that lens. And again, it just creates a specific look that has made me be able to sort of like differentiate myself a little bit more from the norm that is out there, because it's mainly used for architecture, but I find that it's beautiful for portraiture and landscapes really. So yeah.
You touched on like a lot of different elements there. So the 35mm you're using is the 35mm 1.4 version 2 Canon, and to be honest, I think all of your equipment's Canon, and that kind of brings us on to the next point nicely. So you've just been announced as one of Canon's new Explorers of Light. What was that process like? How does it feel?
Canon Ambassador. Yeah, it's a bit mind blowing really. It's been one of my business career goals to become a Canon Ambassador. I've studied it a lot in terms of how do people become Canon Ambassadors, because it's hard. It is hard, and it's been a goal for me for so long that in some ways I kind of not gave up on it, but very much forgot about it, stopped sort of trying for it or thinking about it, simply because this is too hard. and like most things, it was all until that happened that sort of like someone got in touch from Canon, got in touch of all places through Instagram. It wasn't like an official email. Hello,
Dear Mr. Demba.
Yeah, it was a simple DM. It was a simple DM, really. Yeah. And yeah, the conversation started, and yeah, Canon, being a Japanese company, they are super rigorous in terms of how they go about selecting their ambassadors, and yeah, it was very much like a job application. Yeah, super rigorous, super intensive in terms of yeah, it was a job application. It was very much like a job application, and I haven't done one of those for many years.
It's the best part of being a creative. Like not having to put a CV together is my favorite thing on the planet.
Yeah, but starting that process was incredible though. It was really good, because one of the things that I think allowed me to sort of like stand out from the crowd of who Canon was looking at, was able to bring to the table not just simply my images, but video as well of me working, and that's massive prop to you, teaming up with the work that we've done in the past, because again, as I said before, it's the way that the future is heading at. Video at the moment is king, really. To have that within my application was a massive thing. Whilst I've got my work, my look, and everything else, aspirations and things I've done in the past, accolades and whatever else, I find that I think that was the very much the chef's kiss to
the final straw.
Yeah, to very much push things further and make them say, yeah, this is our guy. Because I've been using Canon for years and years since I started. Started with the 350D, then 450D, then the Mark 1, then 2, 3. No, skip the 3, straight into the 4. So for me, always made sense to have that as a goal, because I love the gear, I love the brand. So yeah, and at the same time, I love what they are doing, particularly here in the UK, and very much want to be part of that and be able to push things forward and be an ambassador that is able to bring something different. So yeah, it's been a massive goal ticked. Let's see what comes next, really. But yeah, I'm super excited. I'm super excited about the opportunities that are going to come through it, and super excited to be able to bring something to the brand, really. So yeah.
And it's well earned. Like, there's no two ways about it. Like you mentioned, video content we've made together. You've been doing that and preparing video content using your equipment, which has always been Canon, for as long as I've known you. Mm-hmm. Since 2021 or 22, we've been building this body of work
probably
together.
2020.
It's you might be right. Actually, it might even be longer than that. Yeah. But the reason we've been doing that is because you saw the value in it, and you kind of realize it's the case. And frankly, I wish more photographers were like that. Like, obviously, I'm a photographer, I make video, But one thing I love doing is working with creatives, because I think that photographers produce this amazing stuff. They're usually incredibly interesting people living very interesting lives that never really want to talk about themselves or show what they're doing. Where every other industry has moved to that a long time ago. If you look at Ralph Lauren's websites, there's no stills on that. None, aside from the product photographs. So if you see a model wearing the garment, after 30 seconds when your internet's loaded it in, it moves. Because people are anchored to change, for a start. So if something does change, you pay attention to it. And I think we want to know people better.
Yeah, that's it. And in some ways, that's why I obsessed with the world of YouTube, really, because I'm able to learn for so many creatives. And it's not just the fact of being inspired, but being able to have all the BTS and learn from them. It's super crucial. It's one of the things that has made me grow so much, really. So yeah, I guess, for example, Samuel Elkins, he's a photographer in the US that does a lot of lifestyle photography, and again, if you see his work, it's got a very specific vibe, but at the same time, when you check out his YouTube, the way he explains things, the way he just presents things in general, you learn from that vibe again. It's there. And I very much want that for my work, really. So yeah. I don't know where I went with that, but
that's cool. I mean,
there'll be lots of tangents here.
We've been talking for a long time as well. I think, to be honest, it's time to go get an actual cup of coffee, like the namesake of the podcast. But for anybody that's not watching this, like we're recording this live today, and I want to say a big thank you to James Melia for letting us use his studio. Like, it looks great and beautiful and super accommodating. And actually, this is the first time we've done this in person. So you're my first in-person podcast guest. So thanks for helping with that.
It's many more.
Oh, definitely. I like this. It's nice and relaxed. So we'll see how much more difficult it is to edit 3 cameras rather than 1. But we'll see how we get on. And I just want to say a huge thank you for being here. And in closing, I wanted to talk a little bit about, from an external perspective, like some of the things that people can learn from you. What's coming up next for you from an educational point of view? What's your next project?
I've got so many things in my mind, really, for it, really. But building an online community is very much at the forefront of what I want to do next, really, especially with this new opportunity with Canon and everything else. There's a lot of in-person gathering and work that's happening at the moment, workshops that I really want to focus on and very much hone in on that. But at the same time, moving things online, that's super crucial as well. So yeah, I want to moving into that space a lot more and being a lot more intentional with it. So yeah, just check out my stuff online, and you'll be able to find all the servings there, really. So yeah.
Yeah, less about gear reviews, more about the art and the business of photography. Love that. Well, thanks very much for being here, Igor. Let's go get a brew.